Okay, so we will go ahead and start our next presentation. And our next presentation is called Chicken and Egg Problem, Word Counts or Academic Ability by Mamoru Takahashi from Akita Prefectural University.
All right, thanks very much for addressing me. And I'm going to share my slide with you, so please just wait a minute. Wait a second. Okay. Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Mamoru Takahashi. I'm also known as Bobby here in this community. Okay, today's title is Chicken and Egg Problem. And let's get started. Introduction. Practical skills of English are increasingly required in today's world. Among other activities, extensive reading has been used by more teachers and is a useful approach to improve reading skills. A number of previous studies investigated the relationship between ER and TOEIC test scores. Nishizawa, blah, 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 blah. All in all, they hint that ER promotes the TOEIC test score growth. However, it's not enough to say the merit of ER if we would like to successfully make use of ER in our classroom. In the questionnaire I gave at the end of the school year, many students answered that ER was the most difficult activity among other activities. Even if they knew that ER was an important approach, they kept struggling against their doubt that ER is a waste of time. Is ER really a waste of time because it's difficult to continue? The answer is definitely no. We need to remind ourselves that the more difficult the task is, the more learners gain. For example, the authors of Make It Stick, The Science of Successful Learning, say, when you let the memory recede a little, for example, by spacing or interleaving the practice, retrieval is harder, your performance is less accomplished, and you feel let down. But your learning is deeper and you will retrieve it more easily in the future. As an English teacher, I'd really like to give more information to my students to boost their word counts. How can we convince them that gaining the habit of reading is always difficult at first, but the rewards pays off in the end? In this short paper, I'd like to show the evidence with which we can convince our students that ER is truly worthwhile to spend time on. The research questions are as follows. Number one, how many words should a learner read to reach the CEFR B1 level? Number two, which factor had a greater effect on the TOEIC scores, the learner's initial academic ability or their word counts? This part is the chicken and egg problem. And number three, what psychological factors affected the amount of reading? Research design. When I gave a questionnaire to my students at the end of the academic year of 2020, many of them answered that ER was the most difficult activity among others. One of them even wrote that he felt like his time was deprived by ER. Thus, I felt that it's not enough to say, read quickly and enjoyably with adequate comprehension so you don't need a dictionary. In this paper, some results of the analysis using the word counts, TOEIC online test scores, TOEIC bridge test scores, and answers to the questionnaire will be shared. First, the word count that will be necessary for achieving the level of CEFR B1 in the TOEIC test will be shown. Second, the effectiveness of ER will be statistically shown by comparing the student's original level of English and word counts. Third, dominant factors that influence the TOEIC scores will be identified by analyzing psychological factors. Participants. This was a one academic year study that included students who volunteered in a freshman English class in 2021. The participants in this study numbered 17 male and female first-year students at a 4-year Science and Technology University in Japan. The students were between the ages of 18 and 19 years old, and their native language was Japanese. Procedure. The university library is equipped with about 8,000 regular graded readers, in addition to about 550 ebook graded readers. Students were instructed to start with the easiest books. Books that were 2 or 3 levels lower than their current level were recommended so that they wouldn't be discouraged by high-level words or complicated grammar structures. Word counts were recorded by MReader. It is a website where students can answer quizzes after reading graded readers. When students answer a certain percentage correctly, they receive credit for the number of words in their account. The total word count for each student was downloaded and recorded each semester. Online TOEIC listening and reading IP test was used to assess English proficiency. The tests were administered at the beginning, June, and the end, February, of the academic year. The TOEIC online test scores ranged from 10 to 990 points. The results were given to the test takers immediately after finishing the test. The TOEIC bridge tests were also given twice a year, the first in April and the second in late December. The TOEIC bridge test is a low-level version of the full-scale TOEIC listening and reading test. All the data, including the TOEIC online test scores, the TOEIC bridge test scores, the number of words recorded in MReader, and other data that was gathered in the questionnaire were analyzed by using SPSS version 28.0. Results. How many words should a learner read to reach the CEFR B1 level? How many would Chuck? As the results of the correlation analysis show here, the correlation between the amount of reading and the score of the second TOEIC online test was very weak. Actually, the p-value is larger than 0.05, so there was no statistically significant correlation. However, by performing regression analysis, we were able to draw a regression line that predicts the correlation between reading volume and the TOEIC scores. The regression equation is y equals to 0.000306x plus 402. If we use this equation to calculate the word count that is necessary for achieving 550 points in the TOEIC test, a student must read 483,660 words. That is approximately 500,000 words. Here's the equation line. Number 2, which factor had a greater effect on the TOEIC scores? The learner's initial academic ability or their word counts? A multiple regression analysis was used to create a prediction formula. In the prediction formula, the explanatory variables are the word counts, the scores of the first TOEIC online test, and the scores of the TOEIC bridge test that were given in April and December. The response variable is the scores of the second TOEIC online test. This prediction formula can also be called model construction. When the irrelevant explanatory variables are eliminated, the response variable can be explained by the appropriate explanatory variables. This is why the prediction formula is called model construction. An indicator of the fit of the entire model is the adjusted R squared. This is like a correlation coefficient between the second TOEIC online test scores and the predicted scores. It takes a value between -1 and 1. If you look at the standardization coefficient beta, you can see which of the two, the score of the first TOEIC online test or the amount of reading, had a greater effect on the scores of the second TOEIC online test. A prediction formula that predicts the response variable will be created by using multiple explanatory variables. To see if the prediction formula fits well, you need to look at the coefficient of determination R squared, called adjusted R squared in SPSS, and the p-value. To see if multiple coefficients in the prediction formula fit within 95% probability, SPSS outputs the non-standardized coefficients, which are orders of magnitude different from the other coefficients. The standardized partial regression coefficient is arranged like a deviation value, and it is displayed as the standardized coefficient beta in SPSS. The larger the value of beta, the higher the rate at which the item affected the response variable. So this is adjusted R squared and p-values here and standardized coefficient beta. Prediction formula that is based on the multiple regression analysis is this. And as a whole, we have a good prediction formula. The adjusted R squared is 0.746, is close to 1, and the p-value is 0.01. The most influential factor in this formula is the December TOEIC bridge test scores with a standardized coefficient beta of 0.776. And when we compare the word counts, 0.116 with the April TOEIC bridge test scores, minus 0.1012, we can see that April TOEIC bridge scores had a negative influence. The amount of reading had positive influence on the final TOEIC scores. Unfortunately, the impact of the first TOEIC online test scores, 0.149, is slightly higher than that of word counts, 0.116. In this sense, the initial English ability was more influential than the word counts. However, it's possible that the first online test scores were affected by the amount of reading because the first TOEIC online test was held on June 12th. Our student had read graded readers for almost 2.5 months before they took the first TOEIC online test. Number 3, what psychological factors affected the amount of reading? Another point to note is that multiple regression analysis can be performed to determine what factors influenced the word counts the most. Factors such as feeling pleasant when reading English books and reading willingness to choose a book they can read within 24 hours were used as explanatory variables, predictor variables, when the word counts were the response variable, dependent variable. Prediction formula that is based on the multiple regression analysis like this. And we have a good prediction formula again. The adjusted R squared is 0.875 and the p-value is 0.043. Adjusted R squared and p-value. The factors that influence word counts can be identified when we look at the values of standardized coefficient beta. Among the factors, Q2, Q4, and Q9 gave a positive influence on word counts on the next table. And on the other hand, Q5, Q6, Q10 gave a negative influence on the word counts in the next table. I'll show you the next table. Look at this. These are positive and these are negative. And this one is, would you like to choose an English book that you can finish reading within 24 hours? This was giving a positive effect. And I'll explain about that later. And discussion. Number 1, how many words should a learner read to reach the CEFR B1 level? As we have seen in the previous chapter, there is no statistically significant correlation between the word counts and the TOEIC test scores. P-value was much bigger than 0.05. However, this situation often happens when the sample size is small. The correlation coefficient shows a very weak correlation between the two factors. In our calculation, the word count that is necessary for achieving 550 points in the TOEIC test was 483,660 words. and the number is very close to 500,000 words. Around 550 points in the TOEIC test is the minimum score of the CEFR B1 level. So in my previous study that used the data of TOEIC bridge test scores, I had a similar result. Therefore, 500,000 words can be recommended as a specific goal for future extensive readers to reach the CEFR B1 level. Number two, which factor had a greater effect on the TOEIC scores, the learner's initial academic ability or their word counts? Look at the standardization coefficient better in the following prediction formula. These are the coefficients. Both the second bridge test scores in December and the first TOEIC online test scores in June had greater influence on the scores of the second TOEIC online test. However, the word counts had a greater influence on the second TOEIC online test scores than the first bridge test scores in April did. Consequently, the word counts had larger influence on the final scores of the TOEIC online test scores than the first TOEIC bridge test scores did. This supports the argument that the word counts had larger influence on the final TOEIC online test scores more than the student's initial English ability that was assessed by the first bridge test scores in April. Number three, what psychological factors affected the amount of reading? Among the items that influenced the word counts, the loadings of Q2, Q4, and Q9 had greater effects on the word counts. These are all related to psychological cognition, willingness to read, and cognition. On the other hand, Q5, Q6, and Q10 gave negative impact on the counts. Interestingly, those who didn't go to the library and to borrow books and didn't read the books recommended by someone else read more books. Now, these items, Q5 and Q6, are also cognitive factors. The result led us to think that avid readers are those who are cognitively aware of the importance of reading and reading books on their own will. These are the questions I gave them. Okay, so I hope the result of this small research study provide useful information for other teachers to promote extensive reading. In the future, I'd like to give the information from this research, 500,000 words of word counts to reach B1 level, the importance of cognitive awareness and setting goals to become avid readers to my students, and conduct a further questionnaire survey to investigate whether these factors promote extensive reading further. Thank you very much for your patience. These are the